And it's the whole purpose of the hearing is to give you the chance to tie those things together, explain them to the judge. So I don't think there's a substantial difference, with the exception that you don't get quite the same immediacy of interaction when you're doing this over the internet. There's a little bit of a delay, and so you don't get quite the impact of a face-to-face hearing. Somehow the little delay just kind of makes it just a little less impactful. But other than that, there isn't really, from my perspective, a lot of difference.
Well, and it's funny you should mention that too, because I remember in the days when we were traveling to do hearings, unless you were going to a major metropolitan center, in a place with a large veteran population, you might fly across the country to show up at the VA, and you're going to a conference room where the judge is still on a big screen.
Welcome to the Victory Over VA podcast, a podcast about empowering veterans to overcome denied disability claims. Each week, we deliver critical insights to help you understand the disability process, veterans' benefits, and how to take control of your legal rights. Now here's your host, Attorney Francis Jackson.
Welcome to Victory Over VA, your guide to unlocking your veterans' disability benefits. If you're a veteran applying for disability benefits, be sure to subscribe for the latest developments in VA disability. I'm Francis Jackson, this is Christian Terrison, and we're from the law firm of Jackson and MacNichol, where we specialize in getting justice for veterans. What we do is to bring those cases through the VA system, which unfortunately is painfully slow, but let's talk about what we do in this podcast. What we do here is we try to explain to veterans how the system works so that they can do a better job of presenting their claims. So who's this for? Well, obviously it's for veterans, but it's for others as well. It's for friends of veterans, relatives of veterans, and really anyone who wants to make sure that our veterans are getting a fair shake when it comes to their disability benefits. So today, we're going to talk about technology in the VA system. Take it away.
All right. Anybody who has any exposure to the VA disability system knows that they are, embracing new technologies at every turn.
Finally.
Yes, finally. It definitely seems that way. So I guess just right off the bat, what are some things that you've seen, some ways that you've seen technology impacting the process?
Sure. Well, there are two huge changes. When I started doing this, everything was on paper. I mean, we would literally get a copy of the veterans file, the claims file, typically called the C file, and it would come in stacks of paper folders, typically a folder like this, just full of random paper. And when I say random paper, I really do mean random. The VA literally would they'd have these prongs in the folders on each side, and as everything came in, they would put a 2-hole punch in the piece of paper, stick it on the prong. 2-hole punch in the next piece, stick it on the prong. There was no index, no overview, no nothing. And finally, they have gone to a system where the files are now scanned and prepared electronically, which is huge. We literally got cases. The biggest one I remember, we had a case that came in 3 banker's boxes. So from the floor to this high, filled with sheets of paper. Just ridiculous. But now it's all electronic. It's still not well organized, but fortunately there are now software programs available that will kind of sort and synthesize and organize the material. But the other big thing in terms of technology has been VA a number of years ago recognized that they were serving a lot of veterans in remote areas of the country. And because it's a national program, they had to figure out a way to effectively provide services everywhere. And, when you have people living in remote sections of Montana, for example, it's a challenge. But the VA rose to the challenge and they built a very robust, technically robust system of telehealth where they could have a VA clinician in a hospital facility somewhere get on the internet and link up with a veteran anywhere in the world over the internet. And what happened is that they recognized that there were some veterans who had difficulty traveling to a traditional VA hearing, typically held at the VA's regional offices around the country. And so just before COVID, they started a pilot program of doing their VA hearings over their telehealth link. And then COVID came along and suddenly they couldn't have any in-person hearings. So to their credit, within a fairly short time, they figured out that they could expand this pilot program of doing hearings electronically and do it on a much larger scale. And so they implemented the technology to do that. They set up the judges' chambers with microphones and cameras and all those things, and set it up so that veterans could log into the system and have a hearing. And we were very fortunate in the sense that we had been part of that pilot program, and so we'd had an opportunity to see how this worked. And when they started doing these hearings, what they call virtual hearings, we were in a position to have a lot of our clients get hearings because most VA service organizations and even many VA lawyers were not set up to do these things over the internet. And so there was a big lag, and the board was trying to fill its hearing slots. So they came to the attorneys like our firm that were already set up for this and said, gee, do you have 50 clients next month that you'd like to have their cases heard? So we were able to get a lot of clients heard very quickly while other people were kind of gearing up. But those two changes, the converting the files themselves to electronic and converting the hearings from in-person hearings to primarily electronic hearings, are the two biggest technological changes. They have really transformed how the VA works.
Yeah, absolutely. And when it comes to the digitization of the evidence, I can remember when I started here, we were still waiting for the VA to burn us CDs. And we would be lucky, when we get a new client, sign up a new client, we'd be lucky to have that burned CD 6 months later.
Yeah,
And
that would be very lucky. A year was not uncommon.
it's true. And now we're able to, get the paperwork filed online and in many cases download the case file in a matter of a few weeks. And so even that step has sped up appreciably within the realm of digital technology.
Dramatically.
Yeah, and then you throw AI organization and analysis on top of that, where before we'd be looking through medical records where you're trying to find something about, for instance, hypertension, and they're reporting the blood pressure at every visit, sort of copy and paste, and so you're going through trying to manually separate the useful information from the boilerplate and the copy and paste that the insurance companies or medical providers put in there. And now we have the benefit, instead of just a search, we're able to go through and use AI on top of that search and say, find me all the irregular blood pressure readings, find me the appointments where the blood pressure reading changed. Yep. So even on top of that layer, we're finding more ways to help our clients out.
It's true. And the way that the VA now organizes the electronic files in the VBMS system is better. I won't go so far as to say it's perfect, but it's much better than the random stack of paper that we used to get. So, all of those things have really moved forward. But the one that I think is kind of hovering on the horizon, VA is trying to adopt AI, artificial intelligence, to some of their claim streams. And they're just nibbling at the edges at the moment. But eventually, what's going to happen is that they're going to speed up their initial claim assessment process pretty dramatically in most cases. I'm guessing it's going to take them a decade to get to the point where they really have it kind of spread across the bulk of the claims. But, it's coming. They've started tweaking it here and trying it out there, and eventually it will make a difference. Right now, they're doing it with survivors' claims, DIC claims, and what they've been able to do is to have the AI system search out those cases where there is a presumption that the surviving spouse is eligible for DIC based on the fact that the veteran was rated at 100% for 10 years or more prior to his death, or the veteran had 100% rating all the way back to the time he left service. Either of those makes the person presumptively eligible for benefits for the widow, or widower. So, they're just beginning to move forward with this. But, for those people who fall in those categories, it has sped up that process by 90%. It makes a huge difference, and that's coming. It's by no means here and isn't going to be here in most claims for a while, but it's coming.
Now, this is an interesting question. Do you make any changes in how you prepare a case for hearing if you know it's going to be a virtual hearing versus how it used to be done in person?
Not really. As you know, and some of our audience know, but probably a lot of them don't, there are three elements to getting service connection. You have to show what happened in service, you have to show the current medical problem, and you have to show a medical opinion linking those two. In most cases that get to us, the reason that the VA denied the claim is that they were not convinced of the medical linkage between what happened in service and the current problem. And so for most cases, what you're really going to be focusing on is having the veteran lay out the underlying events in service, whether it was an illness or an injury or the onset of some emotional difficulties. It's not uncommon, unfortunately, for people to be in the service at the age where conditions like bipolar disorder emerge. And sometimes there will be odd behavior in the service that, when viewed in retrospect, can reasonably be inferred to have been the beginnings of this problem. So a lot of the time, the hearing process is kind of laying out what happened in service and then submitting to the board an opinion from an expert in the medical field, whether it's oncology or it's a pulmonary issue, whatever it is, explaining exactly how what happened in service led to the current problem. And, there are all kinds of variations and differences, but, as you know well, for example, some things can be secondary to other conditions, and it's the whole purpose of the hearing is to give you the chance to tie those things together and explain them to the judge. So I don't think there's a substantial difference, with the exception that you don't get quite the same immediacy of interaction when you're doing this over the internet. There's a little bit of a delay And so you don't get quite the impact of a face-to-face hearing. Somehow the little delay just kind of makes it just a little less impactful. But other than that, there isn't really, from my perspective, a lot of difference.
Well, and it's funny you should mention that too, because I remember in the days when we were traveling to do hearings, unless you were going to a major metropolitan center, in a place with a large veteran population, you might fly across the country to show up at the VA, and you're going to a conference room where the judge is still on a big screen.
It's
And
true.
so, in that regard, a lot of the time moving to virtual hearings saved the veteran a 3-hour drive and, all the costs from travel and all that type of thing.
Yeah, I remember when Alex started in 2017, our first trip out was representing one veteran in Phoenix and going back. But the next time out, she left on a Sunday and did cases in 5 different states in 5 different days and came back the following Saturday. And that wasn't all that unusual for our traveling attorneys.
Right, right. Because I was also doing primarily Social Security at that time, and I remember I would see Alex, maybe 2 or 3 times a month because the rest of the time she was on the road.
Yep.
And it's nice now that time that was spent traveling can be spent, working up the cases, communicating with our clients and things like that. So,
Yep. That's a big change.
yeah, it is. And it's one of those things where there's something lost to not being in person. I absolutely agree. But it's not like they were all in person before anyway.
Yep.
And we do
And we've gained a lot in efficiency.
we do gain a lot in efficiency.
And the veterans have gained, we used to have to charge them for the cost of airfare and hotel rooms and all that stuff. And now that's off the table.
Yeah, yeah. Next, I wanted to ask about some of the common technical or procedural pitfalls that folks run into with these new technologies.
Sure. Well, the biggest one is just the same problems everybody has with the internet. Every once in a while, your internet service just stops working. And if it stops working when you're supposed to be having a hearing, there's not going to be any hearing. That's just how it is. And you multiply that because you've got to have a connection for the veteran and the judge and the attorney. So you've got 3 chances for it to go wrong. And sometimes it goes wrong. We've had any number of cases where hearings have been scheduled and either the system was down at the judge's end, or the veteran couldn't get connected, or we couldn't get connected, or somewhere during the hearing the system failed for someone so that they either got dropped out or couldn't be heard, or something happened so that the hearing couldn't be completed. Those are the common problems, and they're pretty common. We lose about 10% of the hearings to one kind of technical difficulty or another.
And actually, with that in mind, I want to make a public service announcement to anybody who may be watching this, who has a virtual hearing coming up or knows somebody with a virtual hearing coming up. The time and time again, people click the link 15 minutes before the hearing is supposed to start, and they've never tried it prior to that. Please, if you're set for virtual hearing, there's a test link in the hearing notice that they'll send to you. Use the test link, and it connects you to a fake virtual courtroom where there's nobody else. It's just you and the computer, and you can test the audio, test the video. It will play it back to you so you can hear how the judge will hear the audio, see the video, how the judge will see the video. And if you can do that a day before, you can tease out any problems and find a solution before you're supposed to be in front of the judge. My late grandmother always used to say, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And that is definitely the case when it comes to virtual hearings. Because as you said, it's a tenuous thread, and you never know if I had $1 for every time somebody connects with video, but the audio isn't working, or somebody can hear what's being said, but nobody else can hear when they respond.
Or the video isn't working, or
Right. Then I could fund the VA myself out of pocket. But it turns out that's all the time we have for today. So thank you for joining us. This has been another episode of Victory Over the VA. Please be sure to like and subscribe and tune in again next week.
we'll hope to see you then.
Thanks for joining us this week on the Victory Over VA podcast. Make sure to visit our website, veteransbenefits.com/podcast, where you can subscribe to the show in iTunes, Spotify, or via RSS, so you'll never miss a show. While you're at it, if you found value in this show, we'd appreciate a rating on iTunes, or if you'd simply tell a friend about the show, that would help us out too. If you like this show, you might want to check out our free consultation to see how we can help you with your denied claim. Simply go to veteransbenefits.com and fill out the form. You fought for us. Now let us fight for you. And be sure to tune in next week for our next episode.